What's up, you freaking geniuses? So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to find the volume of composite solids and also how to find the volume of solids that have voids in them, all right? So let's start with something a little bit easier. We'll start with this composite solid right here. And just to be clear, a composite solid is just a solid that's made up of two or more solids. So for this first example, you can see we have two rectangular prisms, right? They both kind of look like pizza boxes. So we have this kind of like little pizza box on top. We have the length, the height, and the width of that little pizza box. And we also have the length, the width, and the height of the bigger pizza box, right? So in order to find the volume of a rectangular prism or a square prism or a cube, or basically just something that looks like a box, the volume is going to be equal to the length times the width times the height. All right, so this is the formula that we're going to use to find the volume of each of these, and then we're just going to add them together. Okay, so the volume, let's say, of the small rectangular prism is going to be just multiplying the three dimensions, right? So the length is 5, the width is 3, and the height is 2. So we're going to say 5 times 3 times 2. And that's equal to 15 times 2, which is equal to 30, all right? Now let's find the volume of the large pizza box or the rectangular prism, right? So for this one, it's going to be 10 times 6 times 2, right? 10 times 6 times 2. So 10 times 6 is 60, and 60 times 2 is 120, all right? So now to find the volume, the total volume, we're going to add up both of these, the volume of the small one plus the volume of the large one, which is going to be equal to 30 plus 120, which is equal to 150. And our units, we're working in feet, so we're going to get feet cubed, all right? Remember, with volumes, your units should have a cubed exponent because we're working in 3 dimensions, right? So that's the volume of this first one right here. All right, so here's the next example that we're going to cover. So as you can see here, we have a cube. And we know it's a cube because all the dimensions are the exact same length, right? The length, the width, and the height are all 4 inches. And then we have half a cylinder sitting on top of it, right? If this were a full cylinder, we would also have this part right here, right? And it would go to the back. But that's not what we have, right? We don't have that bottom part. We only have this top half of the cylinder. So first, let's find the volume of this cube. So the volume of the cube is going to be equal to, again, the length times the width times the height, which here, again, it's just going to be 4 times 4 times 4, or in other words, 4 cubed, which is equal to 64. And our units, we're working in inches, right? So we're going to get inches cubed right there. Okay, so that's the volume of the cube. Now let's find the volume of this half cylinder. So let's just start with the volume of a cylinder. So that formula is equal to pi r squared times h, where r is the radius and h is the height. Okay, so what is the radius, right? What is this distance right here, the radius of this cylinder? Well, as you can see down here, it tells us that this full length is 4 inches, right? So that means this full length is also 4 inches. So if we only want half the length, right, or in other words, the radius, that means this side is 2 inches and this side is 2 inches, right? So in either case, you can see the radius is 2 inches. So we're going to plug in a 2 for r right there. And then what is the height? Okay, well, the height, don't get fooled, is not this distance right here, right? That's still the radius, right? Because we're going from the center over here to the edge of the circle. So that's just the radius. What the height is in this case would be this dimension right here. Because as you can see, this cylinder is basically on its side. Because if I drew a cylinder, we could do a better job than that. If I drew a cylinder like this, okay, one that's standing up, and I asked you, okay, what's the height of this cylinder? Well, you would say, oh, okay, it's basically this length right here. Okay, now what if I tipped this cylinder over, right? What if I drew it like this? And I asked you, okay, what's the height of the cylinder? Well, it's still this length right here, okay? So in that case, you can see that it would be, since the cylinder is leaning over, or it's on its side, you can see that the length or the height, we could call it, would be this distance right here. And what is this distance? Well, it gives it to us right here, right? It's 4 inches. So we're going to plug in a 4 for the height right there. Okay, so let's plug in what we know. So we're going to get pi, first of all, times the radius squared, and here we're going to say 2 squared times the height, which is 4. So then here, this is going to be equal to pi times 2 squared is equal to 4. And then we're still multiplying by this 4. So then here, this is equal to 4 times 4 is equal to 16. And we're still multiplying by pi. Okay, so the volume of a full cylinder up here is equal to 16 pi. But remember, we only have half a cylinder up here, so we want to cut this in half, right? So the volume of this half cylinder would be 8 pi. Okay, now if you plug this into your calculator, you'll get that this is equal to approximately 25.13. Okay, so this is the volume of the half cylinder, and then remember, this is the volume of the cube. So the total volume would just be adding those two up, right? And I'll write it over here. The volume total would be equal to 64 plus 25.13, which is equal to 89.13. And our units, again, are inches, right? So we get inches cubed right there. Boom. All right, here's the next example. So here you can see that we have this big giant cylinder, but then there's this little or smaller cylinder that's cut out in the middle of it, okay? So what do we know? What is it telling us here? So first of all, for the big cylinder, right, and I'm gonna just highlight it here to make it a little bit more clear. What is the radius of this big cylinder? Well, the distance from the center of the circle all the way to the side, that's the radius, right? And for this big cylinder, it's telling us that the radius is 8 inches, okay? Now, what is the radius of this smaller circle? The one that's cut out? Well, again, that's the distance from the center to the edge. And here it's telling us that it's 3 inches, okay? And both of these cylinders are the exact same height, right? They're both 11 inches tall from here down to here. Okay, so in order to find the volume here, we need to first find the volume of this big red one and then subtract out this smaller blue one. So to find the volume of the large cylinder, we're going to say that the volume of the large cylinder is equal to, again, for a cylinder, it's pi r squared times h. Okay, so let's identify r and h. Well, we already found the radius for the big cylinder, right? It's 8 inches, so we're going to plug in an 8 right there. And the height, we also already know what the height is. It's 11. Okay, so let's plug these into our formula. So this is going to be equal to pi times 8 squared times the height, which is 11. Okay, so then this is going to be equal to pi times 8 squared is 64. And then we still have 11 right here. Okay, so if you multiply this out, you'll get that this is equal to approximately 2,211.68. Okay, so that's the volume of the large cylinder. And now let's find the volume of the small cylinder. So that's going to be the same formula, right? Since it's also a cylinder, it's pi r squared times h. All right, so let's identify r and h. So r, again, is going to be 3, and the height is still the same for both of them, right? It's also 11. So this is going to be equal to pi times the radius squared, so 3 squared, which is equal to 9, and then times the height, which is 11, all right? So then here, this is going to be equal to 311.02, okay? Now, if we want to find the total volume, that's going to be equal to the large cylinder minus the small cylinder. So this is going to be equal to 2,211.68 minus 311.02, which is equal to 1,900.66, and our units are in inches, right? So we get inches cubed. Boom. All right, here's the next one that we're going to do. So you can see we have this big rectangular prism and it's leaning over, right? It's kind of slanting over to the right. And we also have this smaller square prism in the middle of it that's cut out. Okay, so here what we have to do is find, again, the volume of the total rectangular prism, and then we have to subtract out this smaller one in the middle. Okay, now in order to find the volume of any rectangular prism or a square prism, a cube, anything that looks like a box, the volume is going to be equal to the length times the width times the height. Okay, so even though this is slanted or leaning over, it doesn't matter. You still use the exact same formula. So here the three dimensions are, this is the length, this is the width, and this is the height, right? So here we're going to say 4 times 2 times 5. 4 times 5 is 20, times 2 is 40. Okay, so that's the total volume of this big rectangular prism. Now let's find the volume of this little square one here in the middle. So again, it's the same thing, right? It's going to be the exact same formula for a square prism. So the volume is going to be equal to the length times the width times the height. So here it's going to be equal to, let's see, let's clean this up. All right, so the length is 1 foot and the width is 1 foot, and it's the exact same height, right? It's the exact same height, 5 feet, as the big rectangular prism. So the length is 1 foot, the width is 1 foot, and the height is also 5. So that's equal to 5. Okay, so the total volume here is just going to be the big one, 40, minus the little one, 5, right? 40 minus 5, which is equal to 35, and our units are feet cubed. Boom. So if you found the video helpful, make sure to leave a thumbs up down below. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments section below.